You are 13 years old, shivering in a gown too fine for your station, the silk clinging to your damp skin as Rome's golden palace gates open before you. The scent of roses chokes the air, but beneath it, beneath the perfumes and incense, there's a different stench. Blood on polished marble, crushed petals underfoot, the sharp bite of oil smoke burning in hidden lamps. Slaves whisper as they lead you through corridors lined with purple hangings, past fountains trickling with wine instead of water. This is not a wedding. This is a performance. And you are not the bride. You are the offering. As you step onto the mosaic floor of the imperial bedchamber, your hands tremble. The tiles beneath you depict scenes of Jupiter and Io, a god disguised as a cloud, stealing a woman in silence. You are meant to find this poetic. Instead, you feel the chill of the stone creeping up your spine. Nero waits beyond the curtain, barefoot and smiling, a laurel crown set askew on sweat-damp curls. And as he lifts your veil with a laugh too loud for the silence around him, you realize something terrible. There is no escape, not from the man, and not from the empire that made him. But here's where the nightmare truly begins. You've heard the stories, that Nero played the lyre as Rome burned, that he was eccentric, even dangerous. But what they don't tell you is what happened behind the velvet-draped doors of his palace, long before fire ever touched the city's walls. They don't tell you what he did to his wives, not just how he killed them, but how he used them, twisted their bodies into symbols, staged their destruction as public theater, and bent the Roman idea of marriage into something grotesque. Think the imperial bedroom was a place of romance and power? Think again. It was a blood-soaked stage where cruelty wore the mask of love. Roman marriage law gave husbands total control. Potestas vitae nascisque, the power of life and death. And when the husband was the emperor, that power became divine. Nero didn't just exploit this system. He escalated it to a level of horror that even Rome, with all its brutality, found difficult to stomach. You've heard of Octavia, young, noble, daughter of Emperor Claudius. But what you likely don't know is how she was groomed to be the perfect Roman empress. Modest, chaste, obedient. At 12, she was told she'd be marrying the heir to the empire. At 14, she was handed to a man already beginning to lose his grip on reality. On the day of their wedding, as Rome paraded through the streets, Nero paraded his disdain. Witnesses recorded how he ignored his bride completely, spending more time with the dancing boys than with Octavia. By nightfall, the palace buzzed with whispers, not about celebration, but about what had failed to happen behind closed doors. But this wasn't a simple case of neglect. It was strategy. Nero needed Octavia's name, not her affection. She was a political pawn, proof of legitimacy, a connection to the revered Claudian bloodline. Once that purpose was served, she became disposable. And Nero didn't dispose quietly. You are Octavia now. Imagine it. You wake each morning with servants brushing your hair, laying out robes and muttering under their breath. You smile when summoned to public banquets. Sit silent beside your husband as he entertains courtiers, singers, and lovers. Lovers not kept secret, but paraded openly through the halls. Poppaea Sabina, bold and perfumed, lounging on Nero's lap while senators pretend not to notice. Every smile from her is a dagger. Every glance from Nero is cold steel against your spine. And yet, you are still the empress, at least for now. Because here's what they never taught in school. Nero didn't just replace Octavia, he destroyed her, piece by piece, before the eyes of the Roman people. First, he accused her of infertility, then of adultery. A girl barely 17, locked away in exile, her servants tortured to extract confessions, her name dragged through the forum like refuse. Roman citizens, many of whom had loved her, took to the streets in protest. Statues of Poppaea were torn down. Women wore mourning robes in solidarity. And so, Nero responded in kind. He ordered Octavia's death, not a quick execution, a staged ritual. Her veins were opened, the warm blood soaking into the stones of a remote villa, far from the eyes of the people who once chanted her name. Her head was sent back to Rome as proof. But this wasn't the climax. It was only the first act, because Nero's second wife, Poppaea Sabina, would suffer a fate even more shocking, and you are about to witness it. You are Poppaea Sabina, once married to a nobleman, once admired for your beauty, once welcomed into salons for your wit and poise. Now you are the Empress of Rome. You wear sapphires heavier than your breath, and every footstep echoes on marble like the tick of a trap snapping shut. You thought you won. You seduced an emperor. You watched Octavia vanish, her name scrubbed from palace corridors, her blood washed down villa stones. You are the woman who replaced her, but you are not safe. You are never safe. The moment Nero claimed you as his wife, your triumph became your sentence. Each morning, you rise to the scent of rare perfumes, lilies soaked in myrrh, as slave girls dress your hair in coils and gold. You perform the rituals. You walk beside your husband, arm in arm, through corridors where statues of you now stand in Octavia's place. And yet, every time you glance at Nero's eyes, you feel it, the absence of affection, the predator's calm. He watches you like one studies a reflection in a blade. Your stomach tightens, not from poison, from something worse. Because behind Nero's charm is calculation, and behind that, contempt. He never truly loved you. He loved the idea of you, the woman who helped remove the last obstacle to his power, the woman whose beauty Rome couldn't ignore. But now, pregnant with his child, your body no longer belongs to you. You are sacred and grotesque all at once, the symbol of dynasty, and the reminder of what he must destroy next. But here's where it gets worse. The empire whispers of your cruelty. They say you drove Nero to kill Octavia. They call you the serpent behind the throne. But the truth? You play the game because the alternative is death. You smile because the palace eats women who frown. You whisper poison in Nero's ear because silence is what got Octavia killed. You think you can control it. You believe you are different, but you're wrong. One night, you speak too boldly. You ask Nero to spare someone, a senator, a servant, someone unimportant. But your voice rises too high, your tone too sharp. He stares at you across the dining couch, eyes glazed from wine, then stands without a word. The room falls silent. And later, in your chambers, you hear the slow slap of bare feet on marble, the sound of violence approaching. You're still in bed when it begins. Nero is drunk. He stinks of wine and musk, the folds of his toga stained with spilled oil. He screams something incoherent about betrayal, about loyalty, about how you, like everyone else, want to see him fall. Then His foot connects with your belly. You don't even have time to cry out. The second blow comes harder. The third, deliberate. You curl in on yourself, arms clutching your stomach, and for a moment, it isn't fear that floods your mind. It's shame. You've seen this happen to others, to wives of other men. You thought it wouldn't be you. You thought emperors didn't murder unborn heirs in a rage. But Nero isn't a man. He's Rome's god in flesh. And Rome's gods demand blood. Later, as you lie half-conscious on a silk-drenched floor slick with blood and breathless tears, servants dare not touch you. They wait. He walks out, laughing. And you know your child is gone. The sound of her skull cracking still echoes in your mind. But this is only the beginning. Because what Nero did to his wives before killing them reveals a pattern far more deliberate and far more institutional than you ever imagined. Subscribe to uncover the darkest corridors of Roman power, where love, violence, and control were indistinguishable, and no one was ever truly safe. This is how Poppaea Sabina died, according to the Annals of Tacitus, written with trembling disgust. Nero, it says, struck her violently with a kick to the belly, ending both the pregnancy and her life in a single act of casual brutality. Suetonius confirms the tale, adding that Nero wept afterward, not from grief, but from self-pity, because he had loved her beauty. And now it was ruined. But here's the truth they don't teach in school. The most terrifying part isn't that Nero murdered his wife. It's what he did next. He staged her death as sacred. You are her corpse now. Your skin has gone cold. Your belly collapsed inward. But Nero refuses to bury you like the others. He won't let go. Instead, he commissions the most expensive funeral in Roman history. Rare spices imported from Arabia coat your flesh. Perfumed oils stain the burial linens. Gold coins are placed on your eyes, not for Karen, but for Rome, to blind it from the truth. You are no longer a woman. You are myth. A statue is erected in your likeness. A temple proposed. Nero tells the Senate you are divine. And in secret, he whispers your name to another. To a child. A boy. You've heard the stories, but now you'll see them unfold. Because not long after Poppaea's death, Nero finds a slave child named Sporus. He has him castrated, dressed in silks, painted in rouge, and paraded as Poppaea's resurrection. He weds him in a public ceremony, surrounded by senators who pretend not to shudder. And then he calls him wife. In your place. You are Sporus now. And as the emperor presses his lips to yours, the city holds its breath. What you've just seen is not madness. It's something far more chilling. A system built to turn love into theater, women into icons, and death into legacy. Now that you've witnessed how Nero destroyed his wives, first with seduction, then with silence, and finally with spectacle, you're beginning to see the patterns hidden in history's shadows. If uncovering these buried truths resonates with your curiosity about the real human experience, stay with this journey. The next chapter peels back even darker layers of Roman power. And what's coming will haunt you, because Nero's worst marriage hadn't happened yet. You are Statilia Messalina, the third wife, the one they rarely talk about. It begins with the sound of chains, not your own, but your husband's. You're married to Marcus Vestinus Atticus, a man of noble rank and quiet strength, And then, without warning, he's dead. Official cause? Suicide. Real cause? He married you before Nero claimed you. That was his mistake. Because once the emperor sets his eyes on you, you are no longer anyone's wife but his. You do not resist. You cannot resist. You smile when summoned, nod when spoken to, and bow your head when Nero places his ring on your finger. You are not a girl anymore. You know what this means. You watched Octavia fall. You watched Poppaea die. You saw how Rome applauded, then looked away. You understand that being Nero's wife is not about affection or safety. It is about survival through silence. But here's what they never warned you about. It's not just the fear, it's the emptiness. Every day, you play your part. You dine beside him while the Senate flatters. You walk in procession beneath carved marble arches that once honored empresses with names like Livia and Agrippina. But you're not one of them. You're not remembered in inscriptions or prayers. You're a shadow, moving beside a god in human form. A shadow he forgets the moment he grows bored, because Nero's gaze has already drifted, not to another woman, to something worse. You're in the palace atrium the first time you see them together. Nero and Sporus. The boy wears your jewels, your perfume, even your gown. Painted lips, veiled eyes, walking beside the emperor with a practiced sway. The slaves bow to him as they once bowed to you. You are still alive, but you have already been replaced. And then comes the ceremony. You are forced to watch as Nero marries Sporus in a mock imperial wedding, reenacting the rituals once reserved for Roman queens. There are witnesses, senators, priests, all present. The sacred veil, the flammeum, is laid upon Sporus's head. A dowry is declared. Blessings are offered. Nero seals it with a kiss. But here's where it gets truly grotesque. You are the guest of honor, the wife who has not been killed yet, the placeholder. You are ordered to smile as Nero praises Sporus's obedience and purity. You nod as he jokes that the gods have returned Poppaea to him. And later, you return to your chambers where the walls still bear frescoes of your wedding. And you realize you are not Statilia anymore. You are the living corpse of an empress Rome no longer acknowledges. Historical records, those that dare speak, mention you only briefly. Tacitus names you. Suetonius confirms your presence. But there are no speeches, no edicts, no poems. You are the quiet chapter. And that silence was your only defense. Because here's what happens next. Nero's madness deepens. He begins calling himself Apollo incarnate, god of art and order. He paints, sings, performs in public. And with each performance, the line between theater and reality disintegrates. When he plays the grieving widow, he weeps for Poppaea while pressing a ring onto Sporus's trembling fingers. When he plays the passionate husband, he kisses Sporus before thousands. But when he plays the divine ruler, you are nowhere to be seen. You are buried in protocol, smothered in ceremony. You become a role, not a person. And worse, you are expected to applaud. And still, you survive. Unlike Octavia, you are not banished. Unlike Poppaea, you are not beaten. Unlike Sporus, you are not remade. You simply exist, a specter walking palace halls, a reminder of what came before. And that, for Nero, is enough to render you invisible. But invisibility for once is mercy, because what happens next is not survivable. As Nero's performances grow more theatrical, so too do his cruelties. Sporus is paraded not just as a wife, but as an icon of Roman mourning. Nero dresses him in bridal robes during festivals. Then, in funerary blacks when he reenacts Poppeia's death. He stages dramas where Sporus weeps on cue, collapses in grief, is comforted in front of audiences. This isn't a relationship. It's an empire-wide hallucination. The boy who was castrated becomes a mirror for Nero's madness. And the audience? Rome itself. Senators attend these scenes in forced silence. Magistrates bow. Priests bless. The crowd laughs on cue, weeps when commanded. No one dares interrupt. No one dares say what everyone sees. That Rome is being ruled by a man who has turned his bedroom into a theater, his trauma into ceremony, and his lovers into living props. And you are the ghost in the wings. It would be tempting to think you were lucky, that you escaped the worst. But survival under tyranny is not freedom. You lived each day knowing that a single misstep, a glance, a phrase, a hesitation could end your life. And still, you endured. Because Statilia Messalina may have been forgotten in stone and scroll, but she was the final witness to Nero's descent, and she saw what came next. The city of Rome would soon burn, but first Nero would set fire to something far more sacred. He would erase the very meaning of marriage, love, and life itself. And you're about to see how. Because the next act of this nightmare was still waiting to begin. You are standing in the Forum, eyes lifted toward the Capitoline Hill. The sun is blazing, but your skin is cold. The crowd shifts around you like a restless sea. Senators murmur behind golden togas. Vestal virgins avert their eyes. And in the center of it all, like an actor on a stage built from empire and ash, stands Nero. He is dressed in bridal white. Beside him, Sporus, not clothed as a man, not even as a boy, but as an empress. The flammeum is veiled across his face, the same sacred garment worn by Roman brides since the founding of the Republic. He wears Poppeia's rings, her pearls, even her perfume. Nero beams, raising their joined hands as the priests begin to chant the wedding rites. You hear the words, you recognize them. They're the same vows once spoken over Octavia, over Poppaea, over Statilia. But this is no marriage. This is a funeral. Because the Rome you once knew has already died. The crowd claps on command. Slaves scatter rose petals. Musicians strike the first note of what was once a victory march, but now sounds like mockery. You try not to look, but you must. Because what happens next changes everything. Nero pulls Sporus to him and kisses him slowly, in full view of gods and men. And the Senate applauds. What you don't yet understand is that this moment, this grotesque parody of love, is not a one-time spectacle. It's the new ritual, a cycle. And it will repeat again and again, because Nero has discovered something far more powerful than brutality. He's discovered performance. But here's where it becomes systematic. What started as scandal has now become imperial protocol. The emperor has remade the palace into a stage where roles are assigned, costumes donned, and reality itself is suspended. And in this theater, there are no wives, Only parts to play. You are a palace slave now. Your job? To prepare the stage. You polish the floor of the Domus Aurea, the Golden House, a palace so vast it swallows entire neighborhoods. The ceilings are covered in ivory panels that drip scented mist. Dining rooms rotate. Walls slide open to reveal feast. But beneath the splendor, you see the truth. You see the props, the wedding dresses, the funeral robes, the censers that once swung in temples now used in Nero's private chambers. You see Sporus rehearsing lines of grief, falling to his knees before a statue of Poppaea, wailing on command. You see him dressed as a goddess during feasts, offering wine to senators who dare not blink too long. And worst of all, you see the lists. Yes, lists. Names, ages, descriptions, kept on wax tablets by scribes, potential spouses for Nero. Not for love, but for spectacle. Noble sons and daughters reduced to casting choices. Who's beautiful enough? Who resembles Poppaea from a certain angle? Who can cry on cue? These are the questions that shape your fate now. You thought marriage was a union. Now it's a role, a part written by the emperor and performed under threat of death. Historical records confirm this chilling transformation. Cassius Dio describes how Nero turned weddings into tools of domination. Suetonius writes that Nero took Sporus to wife, pretending he was a woman, going through all the formal wedding ceremonies. But here's what they don't record: the cost, because the deeper Nero sank into delusion, the more he demanded of those around him. You are a senator's son now. 16, unmarried. Your family has kept you hidden for months, hoping to escape the lists. But one day, the summons comes. Not an invitation, a command. You are to attend a feast at the Golden House. Wear white. Say nothing. Smile. You arrive and see it all. The painted ceilings, the peacock meat, the gold-dusted wine. And then you see him, Nero. He's laughing as he gestures toward you, whispering to Sporus, who nods and tilts his head like a casting director assessing a new performer. Your blood freezes, because in that moment, you are no longer a citizen. You are a candidate. The next morning, your father petitions for your exemption. He is found dead by evening. What you're beginning to see is not chaos. It is order. Twisted, yes, but precise, because Nero's court runs on ritual, on rehearsed madness, weddings, funerals, laments. Every act serves the same purpose: to affirm the emperor's power over life, love, and memory itself. And at the center of it all, Sporus, the eternal bride. He does not age. He does not object. He weeps when told, smiles when summoned. Historians say Nero eventually grew tired of him, but not before dressing him as a corpse, staging mock funerals in which Sporus would lie still for hours as musicians played dirges around him. Nero didn't want a wife. He wanted a memory he could control. And once that memory dulled, he wanted a replacement. So the cycle continued. More names added to the list, more families silenced, more ceremonies written and performed. The palace became a cathedral of performance. Where the altar was the bed, the sacrament was domination, and the audience was an empire too afraid to look away. But now you must, because the curtain is about to rise on Nero's final act. A marriage that doesn't just mock love, but mocks Rome itself. And in this performance, no one escapes unscathed. You are a Roman senator. Your name is whispered through the forum, spoken carefully at baths, recorded in the marble scrolls of the Curia. You've survived emperors before. Caligula, Claudius. You know when to flatter, when to vanish, when to offer silence as loyalty. But nothing has prepared you for this. Because under Nero, politics no longer unfold in the Senate. They unfold in the bedroom. And now you're standing in the imperial palace, summoned not to debate grain imports or border wars, but to witness a wedding. Another one. But this time, it's not Sporus. It's not even a slave. It's a boy, 12 years old. Your stomach knots. He wears the flammeum veil, his hands trembling beneath strands of pearl. A crown of roses hangs unevenly on his brow. Nero grins beside him, more child than ruler, more predator than man. The priests begin the rites. Again, the same rites once sacred. The same rites once spoken over your own wife, and you are expected to clap. Because here's the horror. This isn't spectacle anymore. This is law. What began as whispered scandal has become institutional. And you are watching the empire adapt. The emperor no longer governs through decrees. He governs through ritual. Ritual so perverse, so public, so grotesquely normalized that the Senate now functions as a theater box. The sacred traditions of Rome, pietas, gravitas, dignitas, have been hollowed out and filled with wine, incense, and silk. But the machinery behind it? That is terrifyingly efficient. You've seen the records. You've watched as the tabularium, Rome's great archive, began collecting more wedding registries for boys than for brides. You've read the new protocols, how imperial marriage ceremonies were to be treated with full legal dignity, regardless of the gender or status of the bride. These weren't symbolic gestures. These were state-sanctioned distortions, because the empire, rather than resist Nero's descent, began codifying it. And here's what will make your blood run cold. You are no longer just witnessing. You are now required to participate. You are given a role in the next ceremony, not a distant seat in the crowd, but a place in the procession. You are to lead the bride down the aisle, hold the torch, speak the blessings. Your presence will affirm the unity of empire as the proclamation reads. If you decline, you disappear. Just like Rufrius Crispinus, once commander of the Praetorian Guard, Nero accused him of possessing masculine authority that threatened his own. He vanished without trial, and his young son, rumored to be beautiful, compliant, terrified, was never seen again. You've begun to realize something devastating. Nero isn't using marriage to express love. He's using it to erase reality. The roles are assigned, the lines rehearsed, the applause demanded. There is no space left for truth. You play your part, or you are removed from the stage. The law won't save you. The gods won't save you. And so, like the rest of Rome, you bow your head and swallow your shame. But here's where the nightmare deepens. The empire begins exporting Nero's model. Provincial governors start staging similar ceremonies in his honor. Statues of Sporus as divine wife appear in temples. Eastern cities compete to outdo each other. Smyrna hosts a festival reenacting Nero's marriages, complete with public weeping and staged bridal deaths. Alexandria sends exotic wedding gifts to the palace. Ivory couches, singing eunuchs, scrolls of wedding poetry written in gold ink. The cult of Nero has begun, and its altar is the body. You are a mother now, Your son is 14. He has golden curls and a voice like water over stone. You've taught him to be cautious, quiet, unremarkable. But one day, a messenger arrives. Your boy has been summoned to perform at a private palace recital. Music, they say. Poetry. You understand what this means. You bribe the messenger to delay. You sell your jewelry, your villa. You buy passage on a merchant ship headed for Gaul. But the guards arrive before dawn. Your son is taken. You are left behind. Screaming is useless. Appealing to the gods, pointless. Because now your son is a candidate, and you will never see him again. Contemporary accounts record hundreds of such disappearances. Pliny the Elder refers to invisible draftings of youths from noble households. Dio speaks of a new form of marriage where the bride cannot speak, and the ceremony is conducted in silence by fear. Even in satire, Roman writers struggled to mask their revulsion. The poet Juvenal asks bitterly, "What's left of marriage when men marry shadows and Rome applauds?" But here's the deepest wound. Rome normalizes it. The empire moves on. Coins continue to be minted. Grain ships continue to dock. The Colosseum is still being planned. On the surface, life continues. But underneath, the foundation is rotting. You see it in the priests, who now bless corpses dressed in bridal robes. You see it in the children, who recite love poems to an emperor they've never met. You see it in the laws, the ceremonies, the calendars, twisted to serve one man's illusion. Nero's marriages are no longer deviations. They are now the system, and you are inside it. Which is why, when rumors begin to spread, whispers of plots, of disappearances within the Praetorian Guard, you lean in, you listen, you hope. Because behind every smile, every chorus, every staged wedding kiss, a knife is waiting, and the final act is almost here. You are Sporus, no longer a name, not truly a person. Just the last surviving wife of an emperor who destroyed everything he touched, including you. You wake in the imperial bedchamber, light trickling through alabaster windows, filtered through drapes still stained from the previous night's theater. Your body aches from posture held too long, from silks too tight, from silence too heavy. Nero lies beside you, snoring through a wine-thick haze, his arms draped across your stomach like shackles. You don't speak. You never do. You have learned that quiet is the only form of resistance you are allowed. It has been over 2 years since the wedding, since the ritual, since the empire turned you into Poppeia's ghost. But now, something is changing. The guards no longer bow as deeply. The slaves whisper too often. The meals arrive late. The candles last shorter. Nero's temper grows sharper. And one night, as you stand behind him during a staged recitation, him reciting verses while wearing golden sandals and a lyre across his chest, you notice the senators. Their eyes no longer dart in fear. They meet yours, flat, cold, measuring. You are no longer his only mirror. The empire is done watching, because Rome is ready to end the play. And here it comes. It begins with smoke. From the Palatine Hill, you watch the fire spread. Not literal flames. Those came before, years ago, blamed on Christians, blamed on treachery. Number these are flames of rebellion. Praetorian guards go missing. Coins minted with Nero's face are scraped down. In the streets, his statues are beheaded, replaced by anonymous busts of the Republic. You are still wearing your wedding veil when the message arrives. Nero is no longer emperor. At first he laughs, then he cries. Then he orders a final performance. The climax. You stand beside him in a garden outside Rome. He wears a tattered purple cloak and asks you to sing to him just once more, like you did on your wedding night. You try, but your throat is dry. His hands shake. He repeats over and over, "What an artist dies in me." Then he asks you to help him do it. The blade is dull, the fear sharper. When Nero finally plunges the dagger into his throat, it takes 2 attempts. And when he dies, you are holding him like a widow, still in costume, still on stage. But Rome is not mourning, because Nero's death does not end the suffering. It reveals its depth. The Senate rushes to erase him. His portraits are destroyed. His name scratched from monuments. Imperial records are purged, temples burned, slave testimonies silenced. The Domus Aurea is buried beneath new public buildings. And you are not released. You are passed from man to man like a cursed relic. One senator keeps you as a novelty. Another forces you to reenact the marriage for drunken guests. One even proposes that you remarry publicly. As a joke, you decline. They laugh, and then one day, without warning, you vanish from the record. Some say you took your life in a public square. Others whisper that you simply stopped speaking, refused to eat, allowed history to consume you the way Nero had. But what matters most isn't your end. It's what you represented. Because Nero's reign didn't just corrupt Rome's laws, it corrupted its soul. The marriages weren't crimes of passion. They were instruments of control. He didn't kill his wives because he hated them. He killed them because he needed to rewrite them over and over until love itself bent beneath the weight of power. And that is the true horror. Because long after Nero's body cooled, the rituals he invented remained. Emperors who followed copied his ceremonies. Lavish weddings, theater masks, controlled narratives. The machinery of illusion survived. And in every empire that followed, every state that weaponized intimacy, every ruler who turned private life into performance, you can hear Nero's lyre, plucking its last tragic note. You started this journey at a wedding, but now you see, there were no brides, only victims. And Rome? It was not merely a city that burned, it was a civilization that forgot where power ends and theater begins. And now, it's your turn to decide. After everything you've witnessed, after standing in the corridors of the Golden House, after walking the garden where Nero died, after watching marriages become funerals and emperors become gods, ask yourself this: where else has this happened? Where else does it still happen? Who writes the scripts? Who benefits from the silence? Because history isn't just a series of dead names, it's a mirror. And what you've just seen reflected in Nero's Rome is a warning. You entered this story thinking Nero was a mad emperor. Now you know he was something worse. A mirror of a Roman world that accepted domination as love and cruelty as law. Hit subscribe if you want to keep confronting the truths history tried to bury, and to see the full horror of human power stripped of its myth. One carved not into stone, but into the hearts of those too afraid to look away. If what you've uncovered in this story changed the way you see power, memory, and the cost of obedience, Don't stop here. Keep digging, because history hides its darkest truths where you least expect them, and those who uncover them are never the same again.